Hello everyone, Grimm here, and welcome to Morbid Mondays. Today we're going to be joined by a very special guest, someone who I believe you are all aware of, Back to Ashes. He will be reading the first story, then it will be me taking over from there until the end of the video. So please, welcome him, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
I was about 7 years old, my brother about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mom woke up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked construction out of town back then, so it was just us three at the house for weeks at a time. Up the stairs and to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left put you in the middle of a hallway. Taking another left down that hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway are windowed doors we always kept locked and rarely used. The door on my end led to a balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened to our backyard. The house kind of leaned into a small hill. My brother and mom both had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I only knew this because I was always a light sleeper and they just couldn't help flushing with the door wide open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. "I'm gonna try to pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk into the bathroom. I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway." I don't know if my mom wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try to scare me or if she was already half asleep and just didn't catch it. But she didn't react at all to my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was terrified by it. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of the hallway or through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bedroom at night. Years later, when I was about 18, my mom and I were having a conversation in her car about a dog we had for a very short time when I was little. We were sharing stories about Max's tendencies towards destroying my shoes and other unruly behaviors when my mom blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside to the kitchen and started tearing open the big bag of dog food we had?" This recently caught me by surprise because in all the years I've lived in that house, we never once called the cops. Gun owner family in a quiet, rural West Virginia neighborhood, etc. I asked her what she was talking about, and she looked equally surprised as if she had just revealed something by accident. "Oh, that's all right. I never told you because you were too young at this time. One night I woke up hearing noises outside my window, and when I looked, I saw a man staring into my window." She went on to describe how turning on the lights caused him to take off running, and how she grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. I can't remember all the details I gave them when they showed up. Tall, white male wearing a striped shirt and jeans, short dark hair, something like that. They said it matched a description of a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out he had escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now, I know this sounds so obvious hearing those two stories back to back, but it wasn't until a few years ago, in my mid-20s, that I pieced together that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who spent multiple nights casing our home.
Okay, so this happened when I was around 9, years old. I'm 25 now. And it's something I will never forget. It still gives me goosebumps to this day. I live in a terraced house, 4 houses combined, and my neighbors and I each have our own little patio. There's a small round 10 meters from my yard where people do their Sunday walks and so on. Only a small fence separates my small yard and patio from that road. I live in a pretty crowded area with several of these terrace houses spread around my neighborhood. So seeing people walking on the road is pretty normal for me. Seeing random people standing on my patio is not. When I was 9, I usually got home from school about an hour before my mum got home from work. I live about 50 meters away from my school, so my mum figured that I was mature enough to be home alone for around an hour before she got home. This one day, I got home from school. I did my usual, which is going around making sure that I locked the front door and double checking that the back door leading to the patio was also locked. Being 9 and alone, it was quite scary, even though it was in the middle of the day and I knew it was only going to be for about an hour or so. After I'd complete that, I would then rush to my room upstairs and play as much PlayStation as possible before my mum came home and made me do my homework. So I completed that and ran upstairs. However, while playing, I heard this noise coming from outside my window. My room was located 1 floor over the patio, with a full view of the road, the one I told you about earlier. It was kind of like the sound of a cat, but my cat had been missing for over 3 months. With that, obviously, hope sparked, and I thought to myself, did he finally come back? I ran downstairs to check if it was my cat, but what I saw when I got there, it still gives me goosebumps just writing this. There was a guy, standing on my patio, a tall guy with black hair covering half of his face, making him look like a male version of the Ring Woman or something. I could hear him making a high-pitched sound, almost like a cat meowing. A brown liquid was running from his mouth, and I could see him spitting out my dad's stomped cigarettes. He was actually eating them from the ashtray. I was frozen, observing this, eventually snapped out of it and screamed so loud that the man must have heard it. He didn't react, he just kept eating from the ashtray. I ran upstairs to my room, locked the door, and called my mum, who called the cops. I've never been more terrified of anything in my life. Laying in my bed under my sheets, shivering with fear as I hear those creepy, high-pitched noises from the guy eating cigarettes, stomps from the ashtray on my patio. I must have blacked out for a moment because the next thing I remember is the police arriving on the road by my yard. I hear them talking to the guy, saying things like, "What are you doing? Get over here, or we'll come up and arrest you," and so on. But he didn't respond. He just kept making the same high-pitched sounds. It was more frequent and louder. I decided to look through the window, feeling safe now that the cops were there. I could see 2 police officers standing by my fence, 1 man and a woman. I did not see the creepy man, however, because he was standing directly 1 story under me and my field of view was rather limited. The police jumped the fence, and I remember hearing the creepy guy screaming louder than anything I've heard before. He charged the female police officer with full force, and he bloody knocked her out cold. The male officer then immediately tased the guy, leaving him shaking on the ground, screaming still. The policeman struggled to keep him on the ground while putting handcuffs on him, but eventually he made it. After a while, he managed to wake up the female police officer who seemed to be badly hurt. He called for backup and an ambulance, and then he sees me standing at the window above him. The expression on my face must have been something else, because he just looked at me and said, "I sure as hell you didn't see all of that." I started to cry. By this time, my neighbors started to arrive, wondering what the hell was going on. One of my neighbors, an elderly woman, made me come down, and she took care of me until my mum got back home. The police took the creepy guy with them in the car and left. Before they left, they promised to come back and talk to us about what had happened. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The male police officer came back later that night and sat down with me and my mum to talk. He explained that the guy on my patio was actually diagnosed with severe autism. He had escaped a facility where the mentally challenged people live, located about 5 kilometers from where I lived. He explained that the guy had actually been living in my house 5 years ago, but he had been forced to move when his mum, his only caretaker, died. The poor guy probably thought he would find his mum in my house. He missed the routine, he missed living there with his mum. The police had to remove him from the house 5 years ago because he was extremely strong. From what I heard, he had extreme tensions in his body because of the autism, making his muscles grow stronger and stronger throughout the years. This was the reason he reacted the way he did when the police came this day. Still frightened, I told the police officer that he needed to make sure that this wouldn't happen again, and he promised it wouldn't. After a few sleepless nights, my life got back to normal, and years went by and the guy didn't come back until 1 year ago. At this time, my mum and dad had moved out. I brought the house from them, and I'm still living here today. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the patio when I see this random guy stopping on the road by my fence. He just stands there, looking at me. I look at him and give him a nod, and then I hear the high-pitched noises. Holy shit, it's him. His hair had turned grey, but the high-pitched sounds made me realize. My heart started racing, and I instantly remembered the reason why he was back. I realized that he must have managed to escape again. Because I kept my cool a bit longer than when I was 9, I started to realize how sorry I felt for the guy. 16 years later, and he was back to look for his mum. I decided to carefully ask him if he wanted to come to the patio. He instantly jumped the fence, and I started thinking that he would knock me out like he did that police officer. He didn't, though. He smiled. He looked at me and he smiled. I offered him to sit down. He didn't respond. I offered him to come inside. He started laughing. We went inside. His face lit up with pure joy. He was home. It reminded him of the life he had with his mum. It almost made me tear up. All of a sudden, he sat down on my couch, turned on the TV, and switched it directly to the cartoons. I observed him for a while. He was just completely focused on the cartoons. I just wanted him to enjoy the moment, so I didn't say anything to him. I realized that I had to call the facility to let them know. The caretakers arrived about 10 minutes later. After a lot of convincing, he got back up, crying, and they went back to the facility. I called the facility 2 days later. We made a deal. His name is Tom, and I now consider Tom my friend. Every Sunday from the day he returned, Tom and his caretakers visit me to watch cartoons. They say it's the highlight of his week. It makes my heart warm. Now, for several years, my thoughts were, let's not meet. The guy on my patio eating from the ashtray. Now, my thoughts are, let's meet every Sunday to watch cartoons, my friend Tom. I deliver pizza, and I'd been having a really busy night, non-stop, back and forth, without any time to pause and take a leak. I'd been so busy that I wasn't really thinking about bathroom breaks, but we're also going through a bit of a heat wave in our area, so I have been drinking copious amounts of water. All of a sudden, as I was driving to this particular delivery, the urge to go hit me. Like things went from 60 to 100 in an instant. Thankfully, I was close to the customer, so I could get this one over with quickly, or so I thought. I pulled up to the house, and it was an area I'd delivered in before, so I could immediately see that there was something not right. All the lights were off in the house, not even the glow of a television or anything. It was extra apparent because the street lights closest to the door happened to be out of order, and on top of all of that, the block was dead quiet. This is a big university area. Obviously, there aren't many student retainers in July, but there had to be at least one person because someone had ordered this pizza. I thought to myself that maybe they just like sitting in the dark, or they were out the back in the backyard, or whatever. I honestly just didn't want to get out of my car and knock on a quiet house in the middle of the night at around 9:30 p.m. without first checking that I had the correct address and that the customer was inside. It was scorching that night. Even after sundown, my car's AC is a joke, and the piping hot pizzas don't help things too much. So I have to try and open the car door as infrequently as possible to keep any cool air in. I called the number the customer provided, and the voice on the other end sounded kind of brusquely and out of breath. I hear a, yeah. I just tried to keep what I was saying on the phone clear and concise, so I stated, "Hey, your pizza's here out front, but there doesn't appear to be anybody home." And the customer replied, still gasping for air, "Yeah, I'm not home." I had to pee so badly by this point that I was much less patient than I had otherwise been with a customer right out of the gate. "Well then, we're gonna have to terminate your order because I've arrived at the stated delivery window and you were supposed to pay in cash, so I don't know what to tell you. Plan ahead next time." I instantly regretted letting my bladder do the talking for me as the voice on the other end came through more clearly as a young, bubbly, and very distraught girl who could have been no older than 20 or 25. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was running down the street so I could barely hear you," she cried. "I just switched you to my earpods. Is that better? Sorry, I completely lost track of time at work, but I knew you were coming. That's why I'm literally running home right now. Please don't leave. I'm starving and I don't have a car. Seriously? Please don't leave. Give me 5 minutes tops, okay?" I know what it's like to be hungry and running late and have no car, but not live anywhere near a restaurant. Plus, when I heard her voice, I began to remember more specifically having delivered to this place a couple of times before, and she had always been perfectly nice. Now I felt bad for snapping at her. I tried to walk it back while simultaneously looking out my window for a potential spot to pee. No, my bad. I'm letting the heat get to me, and it's not your fault. No need to rush. See you when you get here." I hung up, and while surveilling the streets, I was starting to think I was really out of luck. All of the other houses had people in them and were close together, so there was no clumps of trees or out of the way patches of land or anything. And of course, I had just tossed my empty water bottle out at the last delivery because I'm an idiot. Finally, I decided it had escalated to the point of an emergency, and the safest bet was to use a bush in front of the woman's house. She wasn't home, the street light was out, so no one would see me. The people who were at home were inside, my car was parked across the street, and we were a small shop that didn't wear uniforms, so if someone did spot me, they would have no way to connect me to my employer. Animals pee outside all the time, humans are animals, this is fine, things I just repeated to myself. So I scurried over to the tallest bush in her front yard. She didn't really have much of a yard, more just a walkway lined with bushes and flowers that ran adjacent to her front door. The biggest cluster of bushes, the only one where I could be sure there would be no visible splatter on the side of the house, was about a feet from the door. I looked both ways, unzipped, and let it fly. After the initial millisecond of relief, I noticed the sound was way off, more like I was pissing on something solid rather than something leafy. I started panicking, thinking I'd aimed wrong, but once I start, I can't stop midstream, so I just kept squinting into the darkness to see if maybe I was hitting a key rock or something that I could just move a few inches over. Instead, all of a sudden, I heard a way more concerning noise, a deep voice exclaiming, "What the fuck?" And before I could turn around, I assumed I'd been caught by a neighbor. A man came leaping out of the bushes. He blew by me, brushing my golden shower off him as he did. He spat pretty emphatically on the ground, so I think I might have beamed him right in the face. I didn't see where he went after a few paces, but though this next part is kind of a blur, I do think I remember hearing a car screech out from a bit further away after a minute. I had gotten some night vision by this point, so I was able to make out his height, build, and outfit, but only the most general details of each. I was in such shock that I didn't even put my dick away. I just stood there trying to figure out what had happened. The reality was so terrifying that my mind refused to accept it and impulsively searched for a reasonable explanation that could make everything okay. I thought, could these bushes lead to some backyard area and just looked like they were against the house? Could there have been an obstruction in the open window? My inner voice was desperately screaming, "Bruh, that man was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree weather. That was a bad man, and you're in a bad situation." But the very idea that I was within inches of a guy who would have been hiding in the bushes at all, let alone in front of a young woman's house at night, just wasn't something I was ready to grapple with yet. I was coping, but not coping. My fight or flight response totally failed me at that point because my dumb ass did the absolute last thing I should have done, and I approached the bushes to try to validate this. There must have been a good reason for a man in a hoodie to be behind these bushes in the middle of the night theory. So I walked over to the side, turned on my phone flashlight, and tried to peer around the line of shrubbery. Pro tip: as scary as things may look in the dark, seeing them with a single beam of your flashlight can sometimes make it even worse. That's when I saw the bag. There was a tattered drawn string bag sitting behind the bushes, slightly splashed with pee, but I was in such a moronic daze from shock that I groped around for it, thinking, see, this will explain why he's back here. It explained it. Once I maneuvered it over and pulled it open, I saw a sharp knife, a roll of duct tape, a bottle of pills. The delusions officially broke at this point, and the adrenaline, endorphins, and self-preservation instincts that had been suppressed kicked in 10 times over. I became whatever the opposite of dazed is, more laser focused than I have ever been in my life, with one singular goal: get back to my car. I dropped the bag, booked it across the street, got in my car and slammed the pedal into the floor before the door was even all the way closed. I went as far as I could, as fast as I could, until I hit a red signal. Then I pulled off to the side and realized I shouldn't be driving any more than necessary in the condition that I was in. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour drugstore and took a breath. I was finally calm and coherent enough to zip up and formulate a plan of action. My first lucid thought was, who do I call first, the police or the girl whose house that was? I thought about it for what could have been really more than 10 seconds, but felt like an hour, and decided, okay, I am in my locked car with the engine running. If trouble starts, I can drive away. I know something's up. She might not. She needs to know not to keep walking in that direction. But as I was dialing her number, it occurred to me, what if there was no girl? I thought I remembered delivering to that house before, but what if I was wrong? What if the girl on the phone was just a decoy to get me there to rob me, or worse? Every pizza guy on the planet has seen Evil Genius documentary by now. So I thought she called me out of breath. She wasn't home. The whole thing was off. I can't risk it. I'll start with the police. I called the 911 operator, who was very helpful in keeping me calm, because I was completely just wrecked by this point. He kept assuring me that someone would be there soon. I kept telling him that they had to get there before the girl did, but I was trying to express 3 thoughts at once. I really damaged my own credibility. Everything I said just came out in a jumble. I was talking about the girl needing to be saved, that the guy wasn't after me, I was just delivering a pizza, that if they were after me, which in case it might not be a girl, etc., etc. It was just amazing that the man was able to keep up with me. After I got through a bit of a ramble, finally they just told me to stop talking and to stay on the line. But that was when I saw an incoming call from the customer. I couldn't answer it without disrupting the 911 call, so I just ignored it. But then she sent me a text like, hey, I'm here, I don't see you. I told 911 that she was there, and they said officers were only minutes away, but who knew how long that meant, especially after I had given such a scattered account of the events in my panic. I felt overwhelmed with guilt because my rational mind said the odds of her being a decoy girl for some large scam targeting pizza guys were very low, and the odds of her being the intended victim were very high. So I put my call with 911 on mute, where I can hear them but they can't hear me, and turned back, heart absolutely pounding out of my chest, compulsively muttering, fuck, 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 the entire way. Then I took 911 off mute and told them I had returned to look for the girl. They weren't happy about that, but I saw her meandering past the parked cars and the streets, looking to see if one of them was mine, and I waved her down, flashing my brights. She bounced on over to the window of my car, all happy-go-lucky. I figured that that was a good sign that she wasn't in on it, whatever this was, but I was just so scared to be back in the general area and not know what had just happened or what was going to happen. I kept whispering, get in, and she was like, get in? Huh? You want me to get the pizza from the back? I didn't want to make the same mistake with her that I had made with the 911 operator, so instead of trying to tell her the whole story, I stuck to the bare basics. There was a man in your bushes. I'm on the phone with the police. I don't know where he is right now. Please just get in the car so we can lock the doors. I was barely able to get even those sentences out, and I was shaking like I had 10 cups of black coffee. I held up my phone with 911 on the call screen to verify it for her. I thought that was why she got in the car with no further explanation, but it turns out that wasn't entirely it. You still there? Is she with you? Are you safe? Is anyone else there? The 911 operator kept checking in, not knowing who the third party I was talking to was. I reassured them and we drove more cautiously, this time to a location that 911 instructed us to go and wait to speak with the police after they had cleared the area. I didn't actually have to do much after that. The police came pretty soon after. A police car met us. I gave a statement telling them everything I observed, and she went back to go speak to more officers in more detail than they needed me for. It turns out the reason that she got into a strange pizza guy's car without probing any deeper into my story is because she knew who the man was right away from my description. She had an abusive ex-boyfriend who was apparently psychotic enough that he immediately came to mind from hearing "there's a guy in your bushes." She later called us to thank me and insist on leaving a huge tip. I wasn't there when the call came in, so the kid who answered didn't know to refuse and accepted the money. But once the manager had found out that the money had been accepted, he had already promised that the next time we see her, we can load her up with enough one free pie cards to last a lifetime. This is by far easily the scariest thing that has ever happened to me on or off the job. I don't get the chance to tell the story much because I try to avoid sharing it with anyone who could possibly know the girl or know of the event, but I'm still not the same since. Even though I know he didn't even have anything to do with me directly, this truly shook me to my core. So hey, man in the bushes, let's not meet.